so much happened in this book. The writing was so beautiful. It was very... Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Yuna, and today we're going to be doing a book review. The book we're going to be talking about today is Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. So I featured this book in my book haul video a couple weeks ago, and I got to reading it not too long after that video. I think I actually read it like that night after shooting the video. I was so excited to read this book because the synopsis just really caught my attention. It's based on Chinese mythology, which was like first and foremost what caught my attention because I haven't really come across a book based on Chinese mythology. It's also a fantasy book, which is my favorite genre, so I was super excited. It's basically about this girl, her name is Xing Yin, and she grew up on the moon because her mom is the moon goddess, but her mom was exiled, so no one really knows that she even exists. Like, no one knows that her mom has a daughter. So then what happens is she has magic, and her magic flares, and she has to run away and leave her mom behind. This ends up with her reaching this place called the Celestial Kingdom, and there she grabs this opportunity to be trained alongside the emperor's son, so the prince. The prince's name is Li Wei, and as you can expect, they develop a little bit of a romance. The synopsis really intrigued me because there was so much in the synopsis. so that's like just the beginning. This is all in the synopsis, by the way, like everything I'm saying. So she like learns alongside the prince. She has this whole training sequence, and then she goes on a quest to save her mother. She also makes this bargain with the emperor that has ramifications on like the kingdom as a whole. She has to choose between saving the kingdom versus protecting the people that she loves. So I was just very confused as to how this could all fit into one book. To be fair, I mean, it's a pretty thick book, like compared to my other books. It's pretty thick, but I was just kind of shocked that this was all in one book, and I wondered if it was a standalone, but it's not. It's a duology, and upon reading it, I am honestly very curious as to what is going to happen in the second book because so much happened in this book. Not to say that that was bad, but like I do think it was a little bit much. Like there was a lot happening plot-wise. Speaking of plot though, so in general terms, I was already worried that there would be too much happening in this book, and upon reading it, it wasn't too crazy, but there was a lot happening. I do think it was like a little bit too much. I would say in the middle of the book, there was like a little bit of a lull where I wasn't really sure what was happening, but I think the book sort of got over that pretty quickly. And there are a bunch of twists in this book that I didn't see coming, which is always a really great surprise because usually I see things coming. Like, I'm sure if you're a big reader, you kind of know this. You probably have this problem too, where you just tend to predict all the twists, you know? But for this one, I actually didn't predict a few, not all, but like I didn't predict a few of the twists, so I was happy about that. And as to the ending, there's not really like a huge cliffhanger or anything, so that's good to know if you're someone who just really despises cliffhangers. I don't really know how I feel about it because I actually really love cliffhangers because it makes me want to read the next one. And here, like, I feel like everything was kind of wrapped up in this, and like, yes, there were some new threads that were pulled out that I think are going to be addressed in the next book, but there wasn't like anything like super big that makes me really itch to pick up the next one. Not that I won't pick up the next one, I definitely think I will. Also, I want to address the writing. So I think that's like the #1 thing I really loved about this book. The writing was so beautiful. It was very lyrical. It felt like I was reading a myth, you know, very beautifully written. The way it was written made me feel like I was sort of in a fairy tale or a myth, and just by virtue of that, I feel like her writing is very elegant. Everything described very beautifully. The description of the food was I really liked the description of food. Everything just sounded so good, and also all the descriptions of the different palaces and even like her home on the moon. I could just imagine it so vividly in my mind. I felt like I was watching like a Chinese fantasy drama, which I noticed that after reading it, I noticed that on the back where different authors have said different things about this book, a lot of them referenced Chinese fantasy dramas, like Shelley Parker Chan of She Who Became the Sun. She says captivating treat for lovers of Chinese fantasy dramas and newcomers alike. Another is Tasha Suri, the author of The Jasmine Throne, who said, with all the beauty and heartbreak of a Chinese fantasy drama, Daughter of the Moon Goddess is an enchanting joy from start to finish. So I just thought that was funny that I had that thought, and there were authors that said that about this book as well. And now to address the romance, which was what I was mostly interested in because I feel like the romance was the least talked about in the synopsis. I feel like the synopsis was so busy addressing all the different plot points that were going to be happening, it just sort of like brushed over the romance aspect of it. I will say, I think the romance is very prominent in the story, more prominent than you would think upon reading the synopsis. And okay, so pros and cons. One, what I really liked about the romance was that it takes place over a really long period of time. And in general, the story itself also takes place over a fairly long period of time, like years, you know? I really appreciated when, like during training sequence or something, there would be a line that says like months have passed. And I'm like, yes, it takes months to train, not like a week, you know? So it was the same with the romance because the romance was sort of forming throughout all of these like training sequences and learning alongside the prince. I will say though, if you're not a huge fan of love triangles, just keep that in mind because there is kind of a love triangle that happens in this book. I liked it. I thought it was done pretty well, and actually the way the author handled the love triangle kind of surprised me. Like I thought I had predicted what was gonna happen, and then I was wrong. So that was like the main thing where I was like, oh wow, I for once didn't predict what was gonna happen. Another thing is, I guess kind of a con, is that there's kind of a love at first sight element to this, like that moment where you kind of like see each other and they're immediately interested. And in a way, I mean, I don't fault the author for this because that is used in almost every romance book. I think just because like a book is only limited to so much time, right? So I feel like most of the time romances, they begin with, oh, I'm already interested in this person just from seeing them. You know? So yeah, I mean, it's not unrealistic, it happens. So there is that. So if you don't really like that trope, it might feel a little unrealistic in the beginning, but I think the fact that the book takes place over such a long period of time makes up for it. Lastly, what I want to say about this is I'm so surprised that this is a debut novel because it was very, like, I wouldn't say it was perfect, but it was very well crafted considering so much was happening. I think it would have been very easy for a more inexperienced writer to get overwhelmed by their own plot because there was so much, like so much stuff happening plot-wise. It was like one thing after another after another. So I would like to applaud Su Lin Tan for making that happen in a way that was not overwhelming. That's probably the major reason why I was so shocked this was a debut novel. Just so many things happening, and Su Lin Tan's ability to balance that all without it being crazy. I guess I said that was the last thing, but one more thing is I really loved Xingyin, the protagonist. The older I get, I feel like it's harder for me to like the protagonist that I'm reading about. Maybe it's a thing with the fact that I read a lot of YA, like I love YA, but the older I get, I find it kind of harder to relate to these younger protagonists. But I really liked Xingyin. I think she had a really good head on her shoulders. I loved that Su Lin Tan balanced her being this physically strong, smart woman, trying to improve her abilities, alongside also being emotionally strong and emotionally vulnerable as well. Throughout the whole book, there's this whole theme of her being concerned about her mother, thinking about her own romantic issues and relationships and friendships. And I just really liked that. Her character was very dynamic, and it wasn't just like, oh, she's a great fighter. You know, she like did this training thing, she's going on a quest. It had all these other underlying internal motivations and internal things that she valued that made the story that much stronger and made me more curious about what was gonna happen. So yeah, overall, I would say this is an extremely strong debut YA fantasy, or well, adult fantasy with YA like themes, I would say, because the writing itself I think is a little more advanced than just a regular YA book. But yeah, very strong debut novel, and I'm really curious what is going to happen in the next book because just so much stuff happened here that I don't really Like I can't really imagine what is gonna happen next. I guess I would just say, if you like books that are based on mythologies, books with training sequences, with forbidden magic, some dragons, bargains, making the stakes higher, and if you like a protagonist who is both physically strong, emotionally strong, but also vulnerable, then I really, really recommend reading this book. So that's my review. I guess, I mean, should I give it a star rating? I feel like I hesitate to give star ratings because first of all, this is like my first review on here, so like that sets the tone. but also I think if it's not a 5, people freak out and they're like, I'm not gonna read it, it's not good. But that's not true, you know? I think I would give this book a 4 out of 5, and 4 for great. You know, this is a debut novel. It was fantastic. Not even just for being a debut novel, as just its own individual novel. It was really great, very well balanced. The characters are really great. I do think there was like a few issues with just overcrowding in the book, and that kind of, I guess, took away from the pace of the book sometimes. So that's where I would take off 1 star. But overall, I think this is such a strong debut fantasy novel, and I haven't actually really loved a fantasy novel of recent that I can remember that much. So I would highly recommend this. 4 great stars. Not only 4 stars, I'm saying 4 great stars. I hope you guys all read this one, and I would love to hear your opinions in the comments. Please try not to write spoilers if you've already read this book, but I would love to hear about what you thought of it generally, and if you plan on reading it as well. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be back with another video soon. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.